All right, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to 2022-2023 Student Council, and everybody who's watching or watching later. So, Josh asked, is this everybody? Short answer is no, it's not. There is other people who are pretty active that are not in, so other siblings of yours. Oh, I'm just realizing it's dwindling, isn't it? Charity graduated out, didn't she? So Mercy, so it's just you and Mercy, huh? Purity. And Purity, right. So three of the Coxes are usually here, and then the Grubbs are generally here. And we might have other people involved as we go along. And then sometimes people are watching by live stream and might be participating. So technically, just as a reminder, if you are watching live and here, if you are in junior high or high school, you are by default considered part of the student council. How active you are obviously depends on how active you are. That was brilliant. So, and part of the student council's job is to harangue people into being more active. So who knows, maybe they'll do that. All right, before we get started, we'll go ahead and pray. Lord, thank you for this new school year and the new opportunity that families have to learn, to grow together. We thank you for the workshops. We thank you for the student council opportunity for these young people to learn what it means to work collectively towards goals, to engage, to compromise with each other in terms of their preferences and opinions and figure out what's best in achieving the goals that they have. And I just pray that it would be a good experience for everyone. I pray that you bless their deliberations and their activities, and as they go through the nominating and election process in the next month, that would go well, and that there would be a lot of good life lessons learned. And I pray that you would bless our times here and this time this afternoon. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so is this on, Ruth? Am I supposed to do anything?
No, you're on.
All right, so this is our introductory meeting, and I try to promise that I don't talk as much in the other student council because I'm technically I am like the monarchy in England, except I have more power. Kidding, sort of. Actually, not really. Anyway, all I'll say is that we really try to let you guys obviously do as much as you can on your own, and really only if you're going to do something really, really stupid will we intervene and say, no, bungee jumping off of some building in Baltimore is probably not conducive to our objectives. You know, probably not. But who's to say? All right, so, but it's good to remember, why do we do this? Why do we have a student council? It's really helpful any time in your life to ask yourself, why am I doing this, right? Not because it's a depressing question to ask, but because sometimes it's a good question to ask, evaluating why we're doing what we're doing. So why do we have a student council? So I think I do this every year, but so anybody know who these gentlemen are? Benjamin Franklin? No. 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 The funny thing is I always can't remember his name either, but I'm pretty sure I know it, and I'm gonna go with it. But no, you're all wrong. You guys should know. Actually, all three of you should know. You guys have been here in the last couple of years. All right, so I'm pretty sure this is a guy named Edward Rutledge, and I'm pretty sure Rutledge is the right name. Anyway, this is the oldest member of the Constitutional Convention. This is the youngest member of the Constitutional Convention. Okay, so these guys were, and I mean, we're talking like Benjamin Franklin, I think, was 80 at the Constitutional Convention, and Rutledge was in his 20s. So we're talking a 60-year gap. All right, think about that. 60-year gap, both at one of the most significant group events in history. I mean, and here they are, and the question could be asked, well, what could this guy have contributed to the discussion that this guy didn't already know? Right? What Franklin could have just as easily looked at this guy and said, why are you even here? Like, you little pipsqueak, I mean, what do you know? And consequently, this guy could have looked at Benjamin Franklin and said, you're an old geezer, times have changed, let the new generation come in and take over. But that's not how it worked. These guys, and this is just one nuance of that group, right, is the age differentiation. But of course there are lots of others too, right? They came from different parts of the country. They came from different occupations. They came from different experiences. And yet they came together collectively to work towards a common purpose, which was freedom! No, that's the wrong story. Actually, not so much that, as much as actually we need to have some order in this country. We have freedom. We want to preserve our freedom, but we want to have order because we had a lot of disorder at the time. And they were trying to solve a problem. How are we going to survive and thrive as a country with this new liberty they have, but also being able to maintain the independence of the states as a unified country? It was a big problem, and they had to work together to solve that. And they did it collectively, and they did it with people in later seasons of life and people in younger seasons of life. All right, so why do we talk about that here at the Student Council? Because Student Council is composed of students from grade 7 to grade 12. That's a big differential. Josh is a senior. Dan, you're in 8th grade? You're in 7th. So here we go. It's Ben Franklin and Edward Rutledge right here. Except Josh has more hair. But, you know, Josh could look at Nathaniel, who incidentally is also his cousin, and say, what could Nathaniel possibly contribute to the discussion that would be really very relevant? Because he's only a 7th grader. I'm a senior. I've been around the block a few times. I know some stuff. I know that's not what Josh is saying outwardly anyway. We don't know the inward thoughts of Joshua Cox. But anyway, so Nathaniel could be looking at Josh and saying he's a senior, he's on his way out, he's moving to other things, you know, anyway, you get the idea. But the point is that you're all in a little different seasons. Some of you are more peers than others. But you're all working collectively towards a common goal, and the common goal for the Student Council is a couple things. One is you have a desire as a group of people to encourage one another and to maybe do some things this year that would be memorable and neat and fun. You guys want to have some fun? Right? So the Student Council has always been designed to give you all that experience, because this is what life is about. It doesn't matter where you are going to be at in your life, whether you have a family or you don't have a family, you are going to be inevitably working with people in different groups, whether it's your family. I'm in a family that's pretty big age disparity, right? There's me, and then there's my daughter Lucy, who's 1 year old, right? And even though there's a little different dynamic than you guys have here, you're not in here with your parents, but nonetheless, we're in a group together, and I have to work collectively with my wife and children in order to do something. We just took a trip, right? We all had to fly. We all had to work together collectively to accomplish that goal, and I could not have done it without my kids. The kids couldn't have done it with me. So you're going to get that practice. A lot of you, obviously, you'll come from families and stuff, but you're going to have the ability to do that, and you're going to discuss stuff. You're going to discuss what you want to do. Do you want to do a trip? Do you want to, go on an extended trip or a local trip? Or do you want to do some mission-minded service? Do you want to, I'm just going to throw this out here because it's very obvious. Somebody in this room has a father who's running for a statewide office. I don't know who that would possibly be. But, is there an opportunity you guys want to be involved in that somehow between now and November, whenever it is? I guess I ought to know that. What's the date? November what? Yeah, November 8th. Everybody go and vote for who on November 8th. Anyway, okay. It's the less one, not the more one. I don't know who's watching this. I have to be careful with my stuff. Anyway, point is, you got to decide, right, what are going to be your objectives this year? What do you as a student council want to do in the 2022-2023 school year? And then, what do you have to do? You got to decide, how are we going to make that happen, right? You're going to be working on fundraisers. I should be writing this down. So, your objectives are going to be, what are you going to do? You know what? I can probably just get rid of this. All right, so number one, what are you going to do? And number two, how are you going to do it? Okay, those are the things you have to figure out. And then what we're going to talk about today is who. Who is going to lead in those things, all right? Okay, does that make sense? Do you guys understand? This is why we do this. And every student council looks a little different in terms of who's leading. You have, different flavors of how things work out depending on who's really initiating. What I really want to emphasize to all of you is participation, though, is key. It really is. It really is key. Big picture. Let's talk about elections. Let's talk about that kind of thing because it's fresh on everybody's minds. We all collectively live in community, right? Nathaniel, where do you live?
Kimar.
The look on your face is hilarious. Like, I don't know. Help me! I don't know where I am. They only take me out once a week. They blindfold me and put me back in. Please, Mr. Fischer. It's okay, Nathaniel's really okay. It's fine. Right, you live in Kimar. That's a community, right? You're part of a community of people who live in Kimar. Do you know any of your neighbors? Yeah, you do. Okay, you know two of them, two or three of them. You don't know it, and sometimes you do know it, but how you guys are living in Kimar impacts the people around you, right? I mean, you may not think about it necessarily a whole lot, but you do. Okay, Josh and Nathaniel and me, where do we live in statewide? What's our state? All right, we live in Maryland. You are all affiliated with a school in Maryland. Truth and Light, where do you guys live? Pennsylvania. So you guys live, and I love what states like Pennsylvania, historically, and places like Massachusetts and Virginia, you live in the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, the Commonweal. That's not an arbitrary term. That goes back to the whole idea that you are part of a larger group of someones that are representative of something. Okay, going back to your colonial history, it used to be representative of England, and in fact, it's still called the Commonwealth. It's really fascinating that even to this day, those countries and places that are still associated with Great Britain is called the Commonwealth. And even people like us still have some affinity for that because it's part of our heritage, right? So you're part of a larger group. Of course, we all live in the United States. Now here's the question. Who makes the impact on what happens in those places in Kimar, in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, and the United States, and the Commonwealth? Who impacts what happens?
People.
Representatives.
The people through the representatives? Right. So we might say the people who what? The people who participate in what happens. Right? Now, you could make the case that in a sense your non-participation has an impact, does it not? Right? Stuff that doesn't happen because people don't participate is stuff that might have happened had people participated. The biggest way we talk about this, of course, is voting. And, it's one of those things, we can sit down and have a great discussion about whether or not you should vote and whether Christians should vote and yada, 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 yada. It doesn't change the fact that, it does make a difference if you vote or not. It doesn't really matter why, it's just, it does make a difference. Everybody can agree on that, right? If you have people vote and people want to argue about, well, my vote doesn't count and it doesn't make, blah, 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 and we can get all that. But the point is that it makes a difference if you participate or not. So, this council, what you do is going to be highly determined by who participates, right? So if you're out there online, you're not here today, and you're wondering, how can I participate? That's a great question. Make sure you let us know, because there are going to be ways, and I'm going to already put this out. We don't know who our leaders are yet in the student council, but student council, please consider the fact you live in a very interesting time when you actually have the means to potentially do stuff that might actually include some of your online members who may not be able to be here every day, every time, but they might still be able to contribute and participate some way through what they're doing. So just remember that. So, because obviously not everybody can always contribute the same way or participate the same way, but you can participate in some way. You have to be creative about it sometimes, but whatever. Anyway, all right, so we've talked about the what. So how, again, how is, fundraisers, right? Fundraisers are a big part of what you're going to talk about, and we'll get into that as you go throughout the year. And then we're going to talk to you about the who. Okay, so who are the people who are going to lead this charge, okay? So who are the officers in the student council? Anybody want to tell me?
Like right now? Or
Right now, who are the officers in the student council? Right, we have a president. Before we, okay, president, what'd you say, Mike?
President,
Vice president.
secretary,
Your job is making word salads. Sorry.
secretary.
I get that joke, word salads. You guys heard this term that Vice President Harris has now made very ubiquitous? Well, have you ever heard her quotes that just kind of like she says things for about 3 minutes and it just totally makes absolutely no sense? Yeah, so that's apparently, there's a name for that now, it's called word salads. Like you just toss a lot of stuff together and it sounds good and then you serve it. It's great. I always love when these new terms originate from, different stuff. Word salads, yeah. So that's what the vice president does. She or he makes word salads. All right, number 3, who?
Secretary.
Secretary, good.
And treasurer.
And then a treasurer. So those are our 4 main offices, and then of course, wow, that's amazing how I'm spelling things. Treasurer. All right, and then who can be president? What grades?
Oh,
11 and 12. So juniors and seniors can be president. Who can be vice president? At this point, I'm saying 11 and 12. I might modify it depending on what we're wanting to do. Who can be secretary? 9 to 12. And treasurer is also 9 to 12. So you junior hires can't hold office, but you can elect and you can participate in the actual council deliberations, okay? Right? And don't frown on that. We need that, okay? In our own American system, can everybody be president? No. How old do you have to be president? 35, right? And to be 35, which isn't deadly as how old I am. But I have no interest in being president, so I have no idea why anybody my age would want to be president, quite frankly, because I don't have time. Anyway, but how old do you have to be a representative? 21. So think about that. So not everybody can be president, but you can still be a representative. Okay? So same thing. The reason we have this rule is we want people with the most experience, the most interest to be helping lead. President and vice president need to be older. But that doesn't mean you can't participate still in the other things. All right, so this is the who. I have here in my hands a list of people who are in the student council, and I'm going to pass that around to you guys so you can kind of quickly glance at it. And I'm going to pass around the 9th and 10th and 11th and 12th people so you can kind of see who is there. Because what we're going to do today, so between now and our next workshop, which is, when's the next workshop? October. Oh, yeah, so you're looking at the different lists. So there should be 9. So just kind of pass them around. Just glance over the names. You can see who's there. All right, so the next workshop is on the 26th. So basically, we have a month. And between now and the next month, what I would like you all to do, actually, and I'm going to modify this. The next 2 weeks. So within the next 2 weeks, I want all of you to nominate people for these offices, okay? From the list of people here, or obviously you can see who's here. You know people I've already told you who are participants. But it needs to happen in the next 2 weeks, so next 2 weeks would be by...
Next workshop's in the next 2 weeks?
No, that's not what I said. The next workshop is a month, but I'm saying in 2 weeks, so on October 12th, which incidentally happens to be the statewide PSAT testing, which some people in this room may or may not be doing, and people online might be doing. Anyway, what I want you to do is either write down today, people who are here today can actually write down. Actually, Ruth or Donna or someone, can someone bring me some pieces of paper, like, well, actually in this case, just 4. I need 4 pieces of paper. So you'll nominate at least one person for each office. Okay, if you would like to nominate multiple people, you can certainly do that. Just 4 pieces of paper.
Just blank paper?
Yeah, blank pieces of paper. You're going to write those down, or if you're watching online and you're not here right now, you can email me the names of people you think would be good in these positions, and we will nominate them. That's process number 1. So, process number 1. You're going to nominate one person for each office, at least. Okay? Process number 2 is after I've received by October 12th the names for the different offices, I will then contact each one of those people and say, hi, you have been nominated for president of the student council. What would you like to do about that? Would you like to accept the nomination or not? Okay? And they will say yes or no. All right? And then as of that following week, so still enough time before actual workshop, and also, so before next workshop, I'll make sure everybody in the student council knows who the nominees end up being. And then on October 26th, we will have our election for each one of those offices, okay? Everybody understand? Everybody tracking? Making sense?
Is there a list of people I can see? Am I just...
You need to, go ahead and pass those back to Josh. Pass those back to Josh. And I'll remind you that, of course, you can look at the names and realize, I already told you that people like the Grubbs and Nathaniel's siblings are more likely to be participating. Names you don't recognize, they probably aren't going to be that interested in actually holding office. But don't necessarily stop that you from nominating. Maybe this is the way we can get them participating. Okay. That's right. And if 3 people nominate you, you can't say no. So I'm joking. I'm kidding. And it is not at all egotistical for you to nominate yourself. That is totally fine. If you would like to be running in those races, please go ahead and do that. And I will also say it's fine to nominate one person for multiple offices if you feel that's appropriate. If you think that there's multiple positions that they might do. Oh, and I'm sorry, I should say, for those of you who are here and those who are watching, let me give a quick description of what each of these positions do. Okay, president. And I like to align this with what our experience is. Most of you are somewhat understand how our system works in terms of the federal government. You understand that the president is essentially the one who leads. He leads. It doesn't mean he has the power. Obviously, we have a divided government in terms of an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. But the president has a very strong role in setting policy and encouraging a particular direction. He's obviously doing a lot of different things. So in this case, your president is the person who's taking the leadership. He's taking the initiative. He's suggesting this is what we should do. He's answering those questions. What do we want to do and how are we going to do it? However, the president is not necessarily a person who has to follow through and do everything. Okay? Think about the president of the United States. Frankly, I can't imagine what it's like to wake up every morning and be the president of the United States. It is hard enough for me to wake up in my own family and be the daddy and say, what's going on today? Or to come to a place like this and be an administrator. say, what's going on? Because ultimately, do you think there are so many people who are basically giving information to the president, okay, here's your schedule, here's your calendar, this is what's going on, and yes, he has the authority to say, no, I'm not going to do that, sort of. But in some ways, you're a huge part of being a leader like that is delegation, right? You're assigning, okay, you're going to be taking care of this, and you pick people, right? You pick your cabinet, and you have all these different folks who are helping you. Here's my big picture, my big picture idea. Let's try to get this done. Because no way one person can do this, right? Okay, same with the student council. What I really, really would not like to see is the president does everything. That's impossible. It really is. It's really not good for a senior to have to do everything because they got a lot of things that they're doing. But they are, again, giving the ideas, and they help delegate, and they discuss, and they ask, and they go ahead and set that. So does that make sense? That's what the president is doing. He or she is setting that agenda, trying to, and there's a really good expectation that they should be here at the meetings. And if they can't be, that they make the right steps to make sure that they can still convey their ideas and stuff even if they can't be here. And we've worked with that before. All right, vice president. Just think about the vice president. They're the assistant to the president. Our own vice president in the United States is a really interesting role. John Adams was the first vice president, and he was very dissatisfied. He said it's a pointless office, which in some ways there is some point that there isn't a lot of power in terms of being vice president. However, the real reason that you're there is you are helping the president get his message out, right? If you think about it, when someone's vice president to a president, ideally what they're doing is the president can't be everywhere, but the vice president can help. And they're speaking about different things and doing things and trying to help other people get on the same page and whatever. So same idea with the vice president here. The vice president is coordinating with the president to try to make these things happen for the student council and whatnot, okay?
The president dies.
We do not have a succession plan set up in the student council for those sorts of things. Thank you, Truth, for that very morbid, happy thought. Moving on, the secretary has one main goal, and one main job is to be taking notes at the meetings. Obviously, we don't have a secretary yet here, but this is you guys aren't deciding anything today. This is the overview meeting. So, secretary takes notes, gets those notes out to anybody who wasn't here, and tries to keep people in the loop. And they are available to the president to help get information, et cetera, et cetera. That's what the secretary does, okay? The treasurer is in charge of keeping track of the student council resources. They do not actually hold the resources in this case because of how our student council functions. I work very closely with you all. You're generally not actually holding money at your house. It's better if it's coming here and it basically the school, we have a designated account for you that goes into. However, I expect the treasurer to know how much you have and what your expenses have been and what you're going to need to do what you want to do, okay? And the treasurer should be up on that. And I actually expect the treasurer to be more up on that than me, because you might be giving me money to deposit or whatever, but I'm not always knowing, well, okay, what your expenses were and all that, okay? Does that make sense? And the treasurer can work with me to get the information that they need. So those are the 4 roles. Make sense? So as you're thinking about what those roles are, you can think about people that you know, like, oh, that person would do really great at showing up and taking, like they're really great at catching details and stuff. That's the kind of person you want to be a secretary. You know someone who's already really good with money or really good with math or like logistically, they're really good at that stuff. That's someone you want to be treasurer. And then same thing, president, vice president. All right? Any questions about that from this group here? Ruth?
Is there a place like...
Can you check and see, are there any questions out in La La Land?
Is there a place anywhere you...
No, viewers! Ridiculous. Just like the rest of America. Who care? Apathetic. Oh, I mean, that's so good to have you here. That's great. What are your odds of...
There were 2, but they left.
Oh, I guess I was talking too long. That's anyway. Yes.
Is there a place you have any of these descriptions written down or anything like that?
Oh, the short answer, probably somewhere.
Ah.
The long answer, yeah, it's transcribed right now on the little YouTube video thing, so you can get that there. But yeah, I should probably check and see, but anyway. Yeah, actually, no, I'm pretty sure we do. Maybe I can find that.
I don't really know.
Okay, any other questions? Josh, did you see the list of people yet?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so you have an idea of what that is. So what I'm gonna do right now is gonna give you all a few minutes. Actually, no, I'm not gonna do that.
I need to see
I
the.
already wrote it down.
Okay, so you already wrote your stuff down? Good. Okay, so everybody understands the functions, what's gonna happen. So within 2 weeks, so October, what did I say, 12th? So by October 12th, I need to have those submissions. And then the following week, I'll let everybody know what the nominations have been. And if you've been nominated, it's up to you how you want to go about doing much campaigning. If you feel like you want to really, knock it out and start stumping and, haranguing all your student council people with endless emails, and not real big on attack ads in the student council elections, but that could go interesting. You could.
So,
He was homeschooled. So was I, but I was first in my class. Okay, I was the only person in my grade. So, yeah, okay, well, I just have to laugh. You guys, Josh might know a little more about the city of Frederick politics, but a couple years ago, did you hear about our mayoral race? That was such a joke. Yeah, where, the Republicans, all they could put up were these two. One ended up being basically an ex-con with an active, aggressive, violent, aggravated assault charge, going on right then. And then the other guy, had so little interest in what he was even doing. He had no website, he had nothing. It was just, so pathetic. And so it was so bad that, Blaine Young is probably right. So he had been, county commissioner years ago and has eventually got out of politics. And so basically some of the Republicans in Frederick went begging and pleading to Blaine, saying, would you please let us do a write-in for you? And he said, I like my job. No, I don't really want to be mayor. Thank you. But fine, if you want to put me on the ballot, you want to do a write-in, whatever, on one contingency, I don't want to be paid, and I'm only working part-time because I like my job too much. So if I win, I'm only working part-time, so you don't have to pay me. So the best campaign slogan they could come up with for Blaine, and I am not making this up, signs all over Frederick went up, and it went like this: Blaine Young for mayor, clean and safe. Yeah! Woo! He didn't win, which I'm sure he was very glad about. So anyway, so if you want to come up with a really fancy slogan like that, clean and safe, that's up to you.
So
Yes, Nan.
where do we put our, when and where should we submit nominations?
I'll collect them after we're done here today. So I just have one last thing. So when we do have future student council meetings, I'm not really going to talk much else beyond giving you a couple thoughts, because, and I'm going to start today, because I just love coming and engaging with you guys too much not to say something. But anyway, I just can if you want. I'm not actually going to tell anybody who nominated them. I'll just say they've been nominated. So I'm not. If you nominated yourself, I'm not going to tell you that you nominated yourself, because you obviously know you nominated yourself. So go ahead and you can finish that in a minute. Go ahead and put your guys. Pay attention. Pay attention. Put your pens down. Put your pens down. Put it down. Okay. So here's something I really want you guys to consider. As you are going through your life right now, and as you go into, your spheres of influence and activity broaden into beyond just, this particular group of people. Most of us are coming out of what we call bubbles, right? You guys heard that term before? you live in a bubble. The smallest bubble you live in is your family, right? You live in your home environment, and the Shell's bubble is way different than the Fischer bubble, and the Fischer bubble is really different than the David Cox family bubble, and is very different from the Dan Cox bubble. Now, I've actually got to live in the Dan Cox bubble for a little while. That was a long time ago, and that was a lot of fun. But, and then it's like a little bubble inside a bubble, because I'm still in my little bubble. Anyway, this is getting weird. So, point is, though, right, as you grow and mature, you leave your bubble, and you're going into other bubbles, right? You're in a church community. You're in the broader homeschool community. And then, of course, you get more active doing other things, whether you're going to work and whatever. But the point is that as you grow and develop and God gives you opportunity to be reaching out into different places, your sphere of influence, it grows. And the people that you get to impact and get to speak to. And why am I talking about this? Because this is what I want you guys to think about. I want you to really think biblically. Okay? When you're in those spheres of influence. What do I mean by that? So I mean, light, when you are involved in some sort of farming project, right now you guys are raising chickens and goats and those sorts of things, that's bringing you into contact with other people in the chicken goat sphere, right? And you're connecting with people who don't know Jesus, right? I mean, there are people who, Christians obviously are in those communities too, but you're involved in that. And most people you're going to meet, especially as you broaden, and Josh, I'll just pick on you. You guys right now are probably in the biggest sphere you've ever had. Your dad is running for statewide office. You are coming into contact with people from all over the state, all over the region. You are getting to meet people that are not necessarily believers. Many of them are not believers. You're meeting people from very different cultural experiences than you. And you're connecting with them, and you're getting a chance to interact with them and engage with them. So it doesn't matter if you're Josh Cox in more of a political sphere, or if you're like Shell in an agricultural sphere, or if you're Nathaniel Cox, are you doing... That looked bad. That's not what I meant. I'm trying to remember. Are you doing Civil Air Patrol?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you're doing CAP. So again, you're in this kind of sphere. And truth, right now, you're doing stuff agriculturally. You're doing the homeschool community, whatever. Whatever sphere you're in, and whatever you guys are out there in YouTube land, you got your own stuff you're doing too. You are bringing Jesus with you. Or not. Now, if you're a believer, I believe that Holy Spirit is in you, Christ dwells in you through His Spirit, and in some ways it's kind of like you can't help but take Jesus with you. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff you can keep Jesus in the box and throw, a cloak over yourself, and I don't want anybody to know that I'm a Christian. And that is what we as Christians are tempted to do all the time, right? We're tempted to, what is the old song? Let your light shine, don't let Satan put it out, or don't put it under a bushel, right? Didn't Jesus say that? What good is a lamp if you put it under the bed? What if you can't do that? It doesn't give light. But we're obviously all worried about that. I mean, maybe we're not always worried about it, but I know I do. I struggle with that, right? You get into a sphere that's not our nice little bubble here where it's easy to talk about these things, and a question comes up. Now, I'm not in your groups. I probably relate to Josh's sphere the most because I like politics and I've been involved in some of those spheres myself. So I can think about some of the conversations that come up, and the natural tendency of us as people is to what? We want to come up with a solution or idea that it makes everybody happy, which is difficult to do in politics enough. But sometimes what the group thinks is a good idea may not align with what's a biblical idea. Right? Am I right or wrong? Right. And Nathaniel, when you're in your group of friends at CAP, there might be a discussion about something that comes up, and there's a thought about, well, what about this or that, or maybe it's just, you're even discussing, your own leadership, what do you think the guy in charge of you is doing well, whatever, and the group might be in agreement that, yeah, we don't like how he does this. And what they're talking about, you're like, well, actually, what he's doing actually is probably good. Like, it's good that that person does that. And you, what are you going to do? You go with a group? Yeah. And light and truth, you guys are in agriculture. I mean, so whatever, there might be ideas that people have, like, well, we ought to do this and that. And there might be something that, okay, from a biblical perspective, that actually might look different. And you guys might think it's funny to say, there's a biblical way how to butcher a chicken. Sure. I don't know what that is. Okay. I don't know, but I'm saying, is there a biblical way? My background, again, is in law and public policy, and that's what I get my doctorate in. And one of my favorite verses about this is 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 13 says this. Listen to this. Actually, well, I'll start with verse 12. It says, "Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by God. These things we also speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Spirit teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. But the natural man," okay, natural man, who's a natural man? Who we would describe as the natural man, or when you hear that phrase, what does that mean? Organic, he's an organic man. What did you say, Josh?
Sinful state.
Okay, and generally we refer to people who are what? They've not been born again, right? And so and of course we still struggle to an extent with the old man. You're talking about natural men. The world thinks about things naturally, right? They don't think supernaturally. They are not thinking spiritually. They are thinking only in this dimension. What else would they think in? It's not their fault. It's kind of like do you blame a bear for thinking anything other than a bear? Right, you don't sit down and put your arm around the bear and say, now really, bear, you ought to think more like a person. And you ought to be more sensitive. And what's the bear going to do? He's going to maul you and then eat you, because that's what a bear would do. And no one would fault the bear, because that's what a bear does, right? So the natural world, not the natural world, but people in the world, they think naturally. And so when they come up with an idea or a plan or something to address a problem, and they think about it just strictly from a natural perspective or from a human perspective, whatever term you want to use, you can't fault them for that, all right? So this is what Paul is saying. But the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him. Not only do they not think about it, when they hear about a biblical or a Christian perspective about something, they're like, what? I mean, I love this example. Who remembers when President Trump went to the prayer breakfast, and there's a guy who talked about loving their enemies before he got up afterward, and so this Christian was explaining the concept of loving your enemies. And again, I don't know President Trump personally. I don't know where he's really at with the Lord. He's been influenced by a lot of believers. But President Trump asked a great question, because, if he is a believer, he's still very young in his faith. But he asked a really normal question. Love my enemies? What kind of... I'm not there yet. That's really hard, or whatever he said. And of course, a lot of us said, well, the problem is President Trump is only thinking about it from a natural perspective, which... that's totally normal. The whole idea of loving your enemies, especially in a political context, what does that mean? Christian has to come and explain what that means. What does that look like? How do we do things differently? And it's really cool if you look at American history. I mean, no, we're not perfect in how we've done this, but America has incorporated the idea of loving your enemies to practically everybody we've ever beaten. It's amazing. It's astonishing to me. We go and take on their debt to help them up after we beat them. I mean, it's just like crazy. Why do we do that? Because we've been influenced by the idea we don't treat our enemies cruelly. We don't torture people. We try to protect civilians. We have incorporated that whole idea. And from a natural mindset, people are like, why would you do that? And I mean, sometimes it's really funny, because eventually the default setting, even for the natural man, can be a Christian perspective. They don't even know it. Like, You go back a couple thousand years, like this whole idea of being nice to your enemy after you've beaten him. It's like, why would you do that? I want to pound them into the dust and make sure it never happens ever again. Okay, you get the point. Nor can he know them because they are spiritually discerned. So, in other words, Light, when you meet the people who are raising goats who aren't Christians, they're not going to think like Christians on how they raise their goats or anything else. Josh, when you meet people who are in politics, they're not going to be thinking about what it means to be a Christian in politics. They're going to do things like you should do in politics because that's what you do, right? Nathaniel, you're going to find the same thing at CAP. You're going to find all that anyway. So they don't know what's going on. But then listen to this. This is what's really important, okay? But he who is spiritual, who are the spiritual people? It sounds really heady, doesn't it? But in reality, it's who are spiritual people? Because what? We have been born again. Our spirit has been brought to life. We are alive in Jesus. And so we don't look at the world the same way as a dead man. We're alive. And we're like, whoa. I am looking at this a whole lot different than you're looking at it. So because they're spiritually discerned. But he who is spiritual judges all things. This term judge just means you size it up, right? You're looking at it. I mean, are all your chickens alike, Light? How dare you judge your chickens? So mean. You probably think that some are fatter than others, huh? Ridiculous. Well, of course, you better be judging your chickens. Otherwise, you're not even going to get better chickens, right? Nathaniel, does your leadership at CAP judge you? Of course they do. The whole point is to cultivate good leadership for people who might be interested in actually leading places like the Air Force and other places, right? And Josh, what is an election? It is totally about judging. Now, people have different standards how they judge, but you better be judging. You're an idiot if you don't, right? And of course, okay, anyway. So, but a Christian says, he who is spiritual judges all things, yet he himself is rightly judged by no one. That's interesting. In other words, no one's ever going to understand you as a Christian. You are always going to be a weirdo. And that's okay. Don't expect people to understand how you think. But here is what's so important, because verse 16 says, "For who has known the mind of the Lord that he may instruct him?" That's a quote from the Old Testament. So it's basically kind of a rhetorical question. Well, who can know the mind of God? And then here's the kicker. But we have the mind of Christ. Are you kidding? So, in other words, all this time, no one's been able to understand God. And then Jesus came, makes it possible to have a relationship with God to such a degree that Paul says we can think like Jesus. Whoa! Wouldn't you like to be able to think like Jesus? Like, wouldn't it be great? Like, I've thought about this a lot. Wouldn't it just be wonderful, like, in all this mess, to just, like, invite Jesus in? Jesus, could you please fix this problem? I mean, even like with chickens and goats. So you're having a problem, like, trying to resolve an issue. It's like, Jesus, could you please help us figure out what to do with these chickens and goats? Because we just don't know. And Jesus says, sure. Yeah, you need to do this, this, and this. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you. Right? Now, the thing is that that's reality for us, is it not? That is reality for us as Christians. Now, here is where this all comes down and why we're having this discussion today. Don't ever, ever be ashamed that you have the mind of Jesus. And I'll tell you what you should be ashamed of. If these natural people heard you, that you, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You have the mind of, you actually know how Jesus would think about something like this? And you never said anything about how we might be able to fix this problem? Thanks a lot. Like, really? Okay. You remember how the guys on the boat with Jonah, the sailors, these are not Christians, right? These were not God followers. These were pagans. And they find out that Jonah is running from God, and it's kind of like one of those moments. It's like, are you an idiot? You serve the one true God, and you are on this ship running? Thanks a lot. Like, even we know how utterly stupid that is. Like, we don't even believe in him. But, it's like they get it, right? So here's the deal. As you go through your life, and here you are in student council, this is what I want you guys to even be thinking about as a student council. I don't expect everybody in your student council is a Christian. Now, I have no idea. I'm just saying there are going to be people you're going to be involved with, even in places where you think you are with all Christians. Not everybody is a believer. But if you are thinking and letting God be the one who dictates how you approach a situation, that is going to be revolutionary. Okay? I'm going to give you one example and I'll be done. Okay? All right, so... And again, I'll just rely on my own background and experience. But one of the things that how many of you ever heard the term recidivism? Has anybody heard that term before? Okay, it's a really big word, and all it means is how often do people who have been in jail go back to jail? Okay, that's a policy problem. Because, if I'm running a city, do I really like the fact that the people I've just put in jail 2 weeks later are back in jail? Like, is that particularly efficient? No, it means I spent time and energy and money and resources keeping this person locked up, and they're out and I don't have to pay for them for a couple weeks, and now they're back in jail again, and I have to pay for them, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. It's a huge problem. Okay? Now, and ask me some other time what I think about jail. You'll be surprised. Maybe you won't be surprised. But, okay, so this is a policy problem. And the policy question is, how do we keep people from going back to jail? People who have been in jail, how do we keep them from going back to jail? Now, the world's response goes something like this. There's two views, okay? First of all, people say, well, you can't ever change anybody. People are always just going to do bad stuff, no matter what. So the only way we can possibly do this is to incentivize them not going back to jail as much as possible. So let's just create a lot of policies that if you've been in jail before and you go back to jail again, it's really going to be bad. Really going to be bad. Okay. Okay, now there's some truth to that, right? We all know that people are fallen, that they're cursed, right? But what's missing in that element? The idea of redemption, right? What did Jesus come to do? He came to redeem, right? People are made in God's image, and the gospel is there. People can change, not in their own strength, but they can be redeemed. That worldview says, no, people can never be redeemed, and the only way you can do it is through what we call incentives, right? All right, the other viewpoint is, no. I've got it. Deep down inside, everybody's a big teddy bear. They love everyone, and they really want to do the right thing. And it's just been bad. It's been a bad environment. They didn't have chocolate chip cookies when they were growing up, and they didn't have a My Pillow for Mike Lindell to sleep on. It's just, and if we could just give everybody the right circumstances, they get a good education, and they have a nice place to live, and a full bank account, then nobody will ever go back to jail. They'll never do any crimes. Everybody will be happy because their circumstances are so good. And that's all we need to do. What's wrong with that? Do people do bad things ultimately because of their circumstances? Okay, that's a bit of a trick question, right? Because in some cases, yes, it's true. What I would say is the degree of what people will do is because of the circumstances. There are people who will never steal because they don't have to. But that's not why they steal. They're doing other bad things. They're just not stealing because they don't have to steal. Why do people do anything wrong? As Christians, what's the mind of Christ say? What is our problem? We're fallen. We have a sin nature. Our general bent is to do what is wrong and not what is right. So, if I change my circumstance and my environment, does that take away my sin nature? No. It might incentivize me not to do things. And that's why if you think about both worldview, there's elements of truth in each one, right? Sure, if you have a kid who's starving and you feed him, he's probably less likely to go and steal from the grocery store, okay? Does that mean that his act of stealing is still not good? No, it's still sin. It's still wrong. So take that back to what's our policy problem. So if you're sitting down with a group of people who are running a prison and say, how are we going to keep people out? The natural men say, well, we either got to incentivize it so badly that they never want to be back in prison, or we need to make sure when we send them out that we have this whole program set up, and we're going to make sure that everything is just great and wonderful, and while they're in prison, we're going to do right? So you as a Christian, what are you going to say? Well, how are you going to put on the mind of Christ in that situation? Say, well, how do we do this? And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people who have thought about that. One of my heroes is Chuck Colson. He started prison fellowship, and he was in prison, and he got born again in prison. And when he was in prison, he told the people he was in prison with he would not forget them, and he would come back and work to help them have a hope in a future outside of prison. And that's what he did. He started prison fellowship. You ever get to hear or read anything from those people, it is mind-blowing. It is so cool, because that is the mind of Christ answer. The mind of Christ answer to keep people out of prison is what? You introduce them to Jesus, right? You bring in biblical principles, and obviously not everybody's going to get born again who goes through a Bible study or whatever. But the point is, if you actually look at the results, faith-based programs that come into prisons have a huge success. In this area of recidivism, people who go through a faith-based program are less likely to end up in prison again. Okay? That's the mind of Christ answer. Is that uncomfortable? Yeah. Because guess what? The first thing in everybody's mouth when you say, I want to do a faith-based program. Oh, you can't do that. Separation of church and state. You can't bring religion in. And there have been battles that have been fought over that. But you know what? The actual people who run prisons, they like to have you there, as far as I understand. Because it's so black and white difference in terms of how people respond. It's so successful. Okay, so that's just one example. That's kind of a big example. But light, put on the mind of Christ. Remember, you have access to something that no one else ever has access to. This is why, in my opinion, is why Christians cannot be recluses. They can't be hermits. They can't go just be in their own little community. Because the world is dying. The world is floundering. And it's so easy to get a snotty-nosed view of the world. Say, those stupid people. What are they doing? They're wrecking this country. Well, duh. Sure they are. Just like a baboon messes up his cage because he's a baboon. What else do you expect him to do? He doesn't know any differently. A friend of mine always said, wicked people do wicked things. What do you want them to do? So the real person who's got a problem is the Christian who has the mind of Christ and doesn't say anything. Because we're the people who have the ability to offer hope, to offer true solutions. And it doesn't matter if it's public policy or it's Civil Air Patrol or it's chickens and goats. I mean, people might laugh at the chicken and goat thing and say, really? Is there really that different approach to raising animals? Yes. Yes. The answer is always yes. Does Jesus care about chickens and goats? Sure. Who made chickens and goats? Jesus. So you might have a knowledge or two about how you should raise them in a way that's actually better than other people would ever have. Anyway, all right, I've gone on too long, but I think you get the point. So that's my big encouragement to you this student council session. I want you to think biblically. And I'm not talking, you write your little treatise about a biblical worldview on a particular issue. Fine, that's good. Apologetics is wonderful. What I'm talking about is how are you bringing the mind of Christ into every discussion, even in a way that people don't even know it, right? You don't have to say, well, I think this is what Jesus would do. Oh, really? Like those bracelets in the book? No, you just simply say, just thinking. I think that our Civil Air Patrol leader actually has some pretty good points. And they say, really, Nathaniel? We think he's kind of an idiot. What do you think? Well, let me tell you, I think he's doing this, this, and this well, and that's actually really helping me. Oh, okay. Or, your dad is having to do this all the time, still in the legislature and on a campaign trail, right? Because I'm sure he's getting all kinds of great ideas from all kinds of people that want him to do this and this and this and take this policy position and all this. And of course, your dad has to do the same thing. He has to figure out, what am I about, right? And any believer who's running in office, and that's not easy to do, but that's where we start. And then also in your homes, right? Think about your own homes. Think about your interactions with your brothers and sisters, and think about the student council here. Maybe someone suggests, I think we should do this trip. And one of you actually have the thought, I don't know, I'm not sure if is that really what we should be about? Like, okay, well, maybe we should do this. And I don't want you, now here's where you maybe shouldn't be judging each other. Don't tell someone that, their idea is so unbiblical. That is such an unbiblical idea. Okay, you get my point? All right, let's pray. Thank you, Lord, for this class. Bless them as they go through their nominations and as they have their elections. Lord, help us. Help us, help us, help us. We're so frail. We're so cowardly. We want to hide our light so often because we don't want to be embarrassed. And I speak for myself. And I pray that you would help us to act on the mind of Jesus. We're so grateful. You've given us your word, given us your spirit, and we have an opportunity to bring life-giving hope to those around us. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, give me your nomination, and you are dismissed.